Money followed, discreet and persuasive. Sam accepted, not because of the price, but because of the word person. When someone said person, all his internal switches clicked the same way. The vessel they boarded was no trader. Even its air smelled curated. The medbay's centerpiece, an empty stasis cradle of crystalline grace, shimmered with warning glyphs. The failure log was meticulous, almost too meticulous. Sabotage disguised as tragedy. Sam felt heat in his jaw, swallowed the anger, and got to work. The fix was a meditation and a dance, reseating temporal stabilizers whose math he did not speak but whose music he could hum, balancing fields that wanted to drift apart, calming a chamber that had been taught to panic. He improvised, as always, with humility and nerve. In the end, the cradle woke, purring like a rescued animal. Only then did the room admit its emptiness. No patient. No crisis, except the large, living one now filling the doorway. A dragon whose eyes had watched empires rise and cool. "I am Valros, sovereign of the Drakari," the being said, voice like weather. "And you, Sam Weller, have just taught me that my briefings on humanity were insufficient. The sovereign is not here to threaten, but to offer something that could tilt the orbit of history." Sam's first instinct, finish the checklist, warred with the fact that the most powerful ruler in range blocked the hatch. The checklist won by inches. He secured the last latch, set the diagnostics to slow scan, and then finally turned to face the dragon who could, with a gesture, erase a moon, presence like a cathedral, eyes bright as banked comets. "Your cradle will outlive us both," Sam said, tone practical because fear had never fixed anything. "Whatever hurt it won't find purchase now." Valros laughed, not unkindly. The sound curled the air. "You met an empty bed with reverence. When you discovered the urgency was staged, you kept working as if a life waited anyway. I have studied engineers for 8 centuries. They do not do that." "Someone will need this someday," Sam replied. "Better to be ready and bored than late and brilliant." The Emperor moved into the room, careful to disturb nothing. "3 cycles ago you repaired a toy in a maintenance corridor," he said. "My son's toy." "You did not know he was my son. You did not know I watched." Sam's mouth opened to apologize for the improvised wiring, then shut again. "Whoever made it knows beauty," he said instead. "It wanted to fly like it remembered." "Master Threenox made it," Valros said, and the name hung like a gong. "When it broke, he declared it impossible to restore. You made it sing better than new. Now here again, you deny the word impossible." Sam was quiet a moment. He could feel the station's bones through his boots, the low hum of rotating mass and greedy pumps. "Machines want to work," he said finally. "They tell you how if you give them the courtesy of listening." Valros studied him with a stillness that tested patience. "We teach method," he said. "We worship proof, certify mastery, codify truth. It has made us strong and slow. You listen, you improvise, you move lightly. It is, in my academy's vocabulary, reckless. In mine, it is alive." Sam thought of new DAC and sun-blasted pumps and the way his mother tuned rattling engines by ear while his father counted seconds between pulses to set the timing by intuition. He thought of refugee docks where he'd traded food for fixes and found the barter felt like grace. "Where I come from, if something breaks and no one can afford the right tool, you become the right tool," he said. The dragon's gaze sharpened. "Then you see why I have come. The Dominion's ascent has plateaued. We have mountains of knowledge and thinner air to climb. Your kind built ladders out of whatever was near. I would invite that ladder building to stand beside our citadel." Sam blinked. "You're offering me a job?" Valros smiled with too many teeth to be gentle, but with an unmistakable warmth. "I am offering your species a partnership. Not vassalage. Not an annex stamped with an eagle and a seal. An equal seat. Your improvisation, our resources. Your irreverence, our discipline. A balance between the wild and the wise." Sam rubbed a hand over the back of his neck, grounding himself in human ritual. "I fix things, Majesty. I don't sign planets." "You fixed me," Valros said softly, and the admission tilted the room. Not the scales or the bones, but the conviction that strength is only measured in force. "You showed me strength and attention." Sam let silence sit for a breath. "You will need the people who can actually sign planets," he said finally. "Councils, ministers, people with uniforms that itch. I will speak to them," Valros agreed. "But I wanted to speak to the first human who made me doubt my limits." He stepped aside from the hatch and inclined his head, less a bow than an alignment. Before diplomacy turns the sky into paper, he added, "My son will ask to see you. He believes you are a magician disguised as a mechanic." I have not corrected him. Sam smiled despite the scale of everything. "Tell him magicians use misdirection. Mechanics use patience. If he can learn the second, the first becomes unnecessary." Valrose's laugh shook instruments on their mounts. "He already studies between flights." They stood a moment, two beings defaulting to the same respectful quiet in the wake of big words. Sam, never graceful with ceremony, gestured at the cradle. "If it blinks a yellow glyph on the left seam, it wants water vapor reduced by 2 points. It won't say it directly. You'll hear it as a scratch in the hum." "I will listen," Valrose said. "You have made listening seem like a weapon fit for emperors." The sovereign turned to leave, and for an absurd second Sam wanted to ask if dragons slept curled like cats. He restrained the question and instead asked, "Why me?" Valrose paused. "Because when no one was looking and nothing was promised, you chose to make something small whole. Power notices those who are careless with power. I notice those who are careful with little things." The Hatch sighed. The medbay exhaled. Sam sat on a stool and let the weight of the day settle around him like a cloak he hadn't chosen, but would wear until it warmed to his shoulders. An imperial invitation is on the table. But first, someone else has plans to test whether Sam's listening can save a life that actually hangs in the balance. The next 40 hours unfolded with the brittle tension of a cable under load. Sam went back to paid work, vent snarls, a leaking coolant manifold, a communal oven that burned only the left half of bread. But the station felt different, like walking through a map while someone redraws the borders in pencil. The invitation wasn't formal yet. No heralds, no signatures, just a possibility coiled like a spring. Word, however, travels faster than paperwork. By the time Sam closed shop on the second night, a crowd of ordinary emergencies had arranged itself into a pattern that smelled like design. He picked the pattern's center as soon as a teenager in a patched flight jacket skidded into his doorway. Eyes wild. Medbay on Turn's Wish, family ship at B-Dock, stasis cradle failing, and this time there's someone inside. The kid blurted. "Please." Sam didn't ask why him. People always asked him, and he always went. He followed the kid through lift stacks and a rib of corridor glass that looked into velvet speckled with hard sugar stars. The Turn's Wish wore the scuffs of affection. Small vessel, big attachments. Inside, panic had settled into the quiet that happens when everyone knows screaming won't help. The stasis room smelled faintly like petrichor and sterile light. The cradle was not a Drakari masterpiece. It was a human unit with third-party upgrades layered like hand-me-down sweaters. Inside lay a woman in her 40s, face slack with the deep stillness that isn't sleep. The display chattered in red. Temporal drift, field shear. Coolant microbubbles cavitating where fluid should have been a continuous hymn. Sam took inventory, filters past due, an alignment shim bent by someone's well-meaning force, a coolant pump that had begun to talk in a rhythm fatal to anything fragile. He didn't have the right parts. He had tape, a file, patience, and the kind of quiet that calms rooms. "Tell me her name," he said. "Marin," said the teen, swallowing. "My mother." "Okay," Sam murmured, mostly to the machine, partly to the child, partly to himself. "Marin, we're going to make your room sing again." He bled the field to a safe minimum and put his ear, yes, literally, against the pump housing. The chatter wasn't random. It was a frustrated metronome forced to march to the wrong song. He filed the bent shim until it sat true, teased a stuck valve with a warmed probe, and wrapped a hairline fissure with translation tape, letting the alien-compatible film carry a bridge across a human crack. He set a bucket, old habit, to catch the first cough of coolant when the line sighed and read a book's worth of story in a single gurgle. The field's temporal shear wanted a different battle. He rigged 2 capacitors from a disassembled cooking unit, don't ask how he knew which cafeteria would forgive him, and used them to smooth the cradle's jitter, turning serrated waves into rounded hills. The display's red softened to orange, then to sunlit amber. He spoke while he worked, to Marin and to the cradle. "You're tired, I know. The world's been too loud. We'll make it quiet." The teen watched his hands like prayer. Someone in the doorway whispered a question about cost. Someone else shushed them like you shush a child in a theater during the best part. The cradle steadied. Breath returned to lungs, not because the machine breathed for her, though it would if asked, but because the body recognized safety. Marin's fingers twitched, and the teen made a sound like metal finally cooling after fire. Sam held the moment without breaking it with explanations. When the gauges drew a straight line long enough to trust, he stepped back and did the ritual he'd taught himself. 3 breaths, a scan, a gentle tap on the housing, a last listen. Then he set the maintenance schedule in simple language anyone could follow, and left spare tape like a talisman. Outside in the corridor, a familiar, impossible silhouette leaned against the bulkhead, looking somehow both casual and ceremonial. Valros did not fill this space with power. He filled it with attention. "I did not arrange this," the Emperor said before Sam could ask. "But I would have if the universe had not beaten me to it. Your reputation outruns my couriers." Sam scrubbed his face with a rag and let himself smile. "Good, then maybe I won't have to fix any more ovens." "You will," Valros said, amused. "People trust the hands that fix ovens." He grew grave again. "My ministers have prepared the first parchment. It contains more clauses than stars in the window, but its heart is simple. Will you advise us as we invite your species to walk beside us?" Sam looked back at the hatch where gratitude buzzed like electricity and thought of a toy that wanted to fly. "I'll read it," he said. "I'll tell you where it hums wrong." "Good," Valros said. "We will need someone who hears the hum. The parchment is coming, so are politics, suspicion, and a test from a Drukhari master engineer who refuses to be outdone." The parchment arrived wrapped in a sheath of light. Drukhari etiquette meeting human superstition halfway. It unrolled into the air of Sam's shop like a slow comet, clauses shimmering, margins annotated in a script that braided geometry with grammar. Valros waited without impatience while Sam read, lips moving, one fingertip occasionally hovering above a line as if feeling for temperature. Most of it was what he expected: mutual non-aggression, technology exchange under dual oversight, right of cultural refusal, disaster aid clauses, a pilot program for shared academies, even a section, mercifully brief, about cuisine standards on mixed crews. But the heart of it carried risk dressed as promise: joint innovation chambers, physical spaces where human improvisers and Drukhari master engineers would work side by side under rules that protected both craft and ego. "That section's good," Sam said, surprising himself. He pointed. "But if you make invention a contest, we'll spend more time winning than building. Turn the scoreboards into journals. Reward replication and clever failure. Make the prize a story well told about what didn't work." Valros's eyes brightened. "You ask to engrave humility into law." "Into culture," Sam corrected softly. "Law can hold the door, but what walks through is habit." Their moment of accord lasted exactly 1 breath. The hatch sighed and a Drukhari the color of gunmetal entered, each step a paragraph. He bowed to Valros with perfect deference that somehow felt like a measured criticism of everyone else in the room. "Master Thranox," Valros said, almost amused, "keeper of the Dominion's oldest engines. Skeptic of everything I love." Thranox's gaze took Sam's measure in a single, unkind sweep that nevertheless held a craftsman's curiosity. "I have reviewed the recordings," he said. "Your hands are nimble. Your timing is unconventional. You fix with luck in theater. Before you are granted a workbench beside my apprentices, you will submit to a trial." Sam wiped flux from his palms on a rag already bearing a genealogy of stains. "All right," he said, because of course there was going to be a test. "What's the patient?" Thranox gestured, and a case unfolded like a flower to reveal an object that made the air sing flat. It was neither machine nor sculpture, but rudely both. An ancient field resonator from the Dominion's first interstellar forays. Pitted, hairline fractured, its inner lattice out of tune in a way that would take careful weeks to diagnose and careful years to repair. The master's eyes glittered. "You will return this to spec without altering its design." Sam leaned close. His first instinct, replace the cracked lattice with translation tape and teach the device to accept the age in its bones, failed the constraint. He set that urge aside and did the thing academic training rarely encourages. He listened without reaching for a fix. No tools, no heroics. Just 10 minutes of stillness while the room grew uncomfortable, and the resonator confessed softly in a language more rhythm than note. "Your lattice was grown in a gravity well 1/2 a point different from ours," Sam murmured finally. "It's been forced to pretend the well never changed. That's where the sorrow lives." He looked up. "I won't alter the design. I'll rehearse it. Bring me heat, slow rotation, and time. The time drew a scoff, but Valros intervened. He means patience. They built a poor mimic of the old well with what they had. A lazy turntable, calibrated heat, and a field bath just shy of illicit. Sam guided the resonator through a series of temperature tides while it rotated so slowly that doubt could root and die between the marks. Microfractures sighed shut of their own accord, as the lattice remembered the conditions of its birth. He did not force it into tune. He summoned its original pitch. Hours later, when the device hummed a true note that made Threenox's crest rise despite himself, Sam didn't celebrate. He just set a maintenance schedule written as a story. On first light, warm the bones. On third light, remind the resonator where it learned to sing. Once each long week, let it rotate like a planet remembering. Threenox considered him as if evaluating a dangerous tool. You have disobeyed and yet obeyed, he said at last. Accepted. Valros' expression was a constellation of relief and provocation. Then we shall open the first chamber here on Harmony's refuge. Sam rubbed his eyes. Open it where the ovens break and the stasis pods sing, he said. Where people will bring us real problems instead of prestige puzzles. Done, Valros said. The chamber opens at dawn, but someone else plans to close it by midnight, using sabotage that frames the very human they fear. News of the joint innovation chamber spread like spice in stew, fast, loud, and difficult to remove once mixed. By midday, a line formed outside the old cargo hangar repainted in joint colors, human scaffold blue against Drakari ember gold. Inside, modular benches held both metric and claw-threaded clamps. Whiteboards faced crystal slates. A chalk bowl sat beside a laser etcher as if they were cousins at a reunion. Sam arrived to find Kellen already prowling the perimeter, braids pinned back, eyes bright. I volunteered to wrangle intake, they said. 2 busted harvesters, a failing water recycler, 1 musician with an instrument that forgot its only song, and a grandmother who swears her late wife's tea kettle speaks prophecy if you boil it at the right speed. Start the kettle, Sam said. Prophecy's good for morale. Threenox entered with an entourage like a living syllabus. Young Drakari with toolkits and spines straight enough to draw diagrams against. They exchanged stiff courtesies with human techs who met stiffness with jokes and offered coffee to claws that didn't quite know how to hold mugs. The first hour was a dance of resorted expectations. The second, a miracle of small wins. A water recycler's membrane got a second life. The musician's instrument, part glass, part wind, rediscovered its song when a Drakari apprentice suggested adding a cavity to store silence between notes. By evening, hope had made itself comfortable. That was when the lights died. Emergency strips guttered on. Panels complained about overload spiking upstream. Sam's gut dropped. Sudden failures announce a plan. He and Threenox tracked the fault like hounds through the station's sublayers to a junction where the chamber's feeds braided into common power. At the knot, a neat sabotage disguised as incompetence, using exactly the human sloppiness certain factions love to cite in speeches whispered behind armored doors. If these burns go to council, they'll read reckless improvisation, Kellen said from the hatch, face set. You'll be barred before you're begun. Threenox's crest trembled with an anger he didn't bother to hide. This cut was done with a guild tool, or a forgery meant to sing like one, Sam said, already unrolling tools. He didn't waste breath on outrage. The best rebuttal to a lie is a working system. We're not just fixing a line. We're writing a story about how it failed, one that any honest eye can read. They worked with the deliberateness of a liturgy. Instead of swapping only the charred segment, Sam mapped the heat bloom along 3 meters of conduit, photographing, labeling, time-stamping every bolt. Threenox micro-etched signatures into new connectors, a unique grain pattern that made later tampering obvious. Kellen ran crowd control with theater. We expected gremlins. This is how you teach gremlins not to return. An hour later, power returned in stages. The grandmother's kettle whistled a little smugly. Cheering broke out because stations treat electricity like weather turning fair. Sam let the sound wash past. His eyes were on the logs. The saboteur had been clever but not careful. A relay 2 decks down bore a palm smudge in a flux compound most humans didn't use because it stank like old onions. The Drakari used it often. Threenox followed his gaze. If we pull this thread loudly, we start a fire we cannot contain, he said. If we pull it quietly, we risk more cuts. Sam wiped his hands. We pull it honestly, he said. Document, publish, invite review. No hissing in corridors. Sunlight. If the saboteur is yours, let mine help hold the light. If the saboteur is mine, you do the same. Valros arrived without fanfare and read the story they'd written in heat maps and notes. For a long moment, he was not an emperor, but a disappointed teacher. Proceed, he said finally, with sunlight. The report went live before midnight on the chamber's open log, translated into both cultures' languages of shame and pride. Reactions were immediate, jagged, mixed. That was fine. Mixed meant alive. The log draws out the saboteur, who answers not with denial, but with a challenge that threatens to turn the chamber into a courtroom. The challenge landed at dawn. A formal Drakari contest of methods, invoked rarely and designed to settle disputes between guilds without ruining cities. 2 teams. 1 problem delivered blind. Public audience. Winner earns not just prestige but the right to define remedial policy for a year. Someone wants to paint us reckless with our own brush, Kellen muttered, scanning the rules projected in amber. If we refuse, we confess. If we accept and lose, we confirm. We accept, Threenock said before Sam could. His voice was granite. If the chamber breathes, it must also fight infection. The problem arrived sealed in a capsule, opening only when both teams' signatures braided around it. Inside, the schematics of a collapsed habitat dome from a frontier moon. The dome's frame was warped by sandstorms and micro-impacts. Its air was thin. Its support bots were outdated by 2 generations. The task? Restore safe pressure with on-hand materials, no fresh shipments within 12 hours. Constraints perfect for a narrative of human corner-cutting. Sam didn't look at the other team. Drakari purists led by a senior engineer with spotless crests and eyes like cold tea. He looked instead at the dome's bones and the bot's motor limitations. We treat the dome like a lung, he said. Not a wall. Threenock surprised him by nodding immediately. Expand on the exhale, he said, already sketching. Contract on the inhale. Let the pressure work with us. They divided the room. Humans cannibalized scrap for bellow struts, flexing members that could take cyclical load without fatigue. Drakari apprentices tuned the bot's firmware to move in rhythm rather than brute repetition. Kellen coordinated the salvage crews like a conductor calling crescendos, routing flexible membranes from water vats and repurposing them as inner liners. The grandmother's kettle became a metronome. No one questioned it. At hour 4 they hit the wall, micro-leaks along a seam that refused every sealant because the dust on that moon carried a static charge that laughed at adhesives. The other team, visible across the chamber floor, had chosen rigidity, bracing and overpressuring, trying to make the dome forget it was tired by shouting. Their progress was dramatic, photogenic, brittle. Sam set his ear to the liner, listening to the hiss not as a failure, but as an instrument found in a junk shop. He remembered the musician's silence cavity and grinned. We don't fight the hiss, he said. We store it. He and Threenox cut small cavities into the liner at leak points, shaping them to trap the hiss as a standing wave. The leaks sang into their cages and stayed. The dome's cough softened. Pressure climbed like a sunrise. Hour 9, the purist's dome cracked a brace. Hour 11, their overpressure blew a gasket and the audience's collective inhale became an indictment. Sam didn't gloat. He walked their edge and quietly handed over 2 spare bellow struts and a length of membrane. Contests make for bad neighbors, he said. We all live under domes. The senior engineer's eyes flickered, anger, then the kind of respect that doesn't admit itself out loud. They took the parts. They stabilized. At hour 12, 2 domes stood, one flexible, pulsing with breath. One repaired, rigid, functional. Judges conferred in a murmur. The verdict favored breath, not because it was prettier, but because it used less energy to maintain and could survive insult without catastrophic collapse. The chamber did not explode into triumph. It exhaled. Valros smiled, small and real. Threenox allowed himself a brief, indecorous whoop. The saboteur revealed themselves not in shackles but in a statement signed by 3 purist guild heads. They had orchestrated the earlier cut to demonstrate human hazard. Their apology landed like a rock in a river, heavy, then quickly remapped by current. We were wrong, the statement said. About the hazard, not about the need for caution. We'll take both, Sam said. Your caution, our breath. With legitimacy won, the chamber must handle its first true catastrophe, a station-wide life support failure that no one engineered on purpose. The alarm began as a polite tone and became a scream. Life support had entered cascade failure, filters loading to saturation in minutes, pumps hunting, CO2 climbing like a bad dream. Harmony's refuge, old, patched, proud, had hit a long-predicted cliff. People ran, then stopped running because where do you run on a ring? Panic tried to take the shape of purpose. The chamber became a brain overnight. Threenock snapped orders that sounded like drum beats. Human techs pulled up schematics that had been annotated so many times they looked like palimpsests of prayers. Sam touched the bulkhead and felt the station's breath going ragged. "We need to slow the lungs," he said. "Not just patch filters. Change the rhythm." "Explain," Valro said, already moving. "We've been pushing steady," Sam answered. "Steady is safe until it isn't. If we switch to pulsed flow, we give filters time to settle and shed load between draws. We also need to cool the air. Colder gas carries less CO2 per unit pressure at the velocities we can maintain. We don't have the gear to do it everywhere, but we can do it where it matters and let the edges borrow calm." Threenock didn't argue. He calculated in public so everyone could see the doubt, the math, the acceptance. "Pulsed flow will shake loose anything not bolted," he warned. "And the station is a museum of unbolted. Then we bolt as we go," Kellen said, already dispatching crews with wrenches and rope and the kind of humor that makes courage cheaper. "If it rattles, we bless it." They partitioned the ring into breathing segments, zones that would inhale while their neighbors exhaled, like a stadium wave of oxygen. Drakari apprentices rewrote control loops on ancient pumps that protested by coughing up error codes no one had seen in decades. Humans with cold hands packed ice around key exchanger housings, trading warmth for time. Sam climbed into a shaft so narrow his shoulders knocked sympathy out of the walls. He found a sensor array whispering lies because condensation had caked its face. He cleaned it with the edge of his shirt and a prayer to no one, then retuned the loop to trust rate of change over absolute numbers. Absolute numbers were panicked. Rate of change was honest. The first pulse shuddered through the station like a giant had just inhaled. Lights dimmed. 15 valves complained. 3 popped. People braced for worse and found instead that the air tasted less old. They moved, adjusting pulses like conductors working a difficult room, each zone learning the other's timing until the ring ceased to feel like a set of neighborhoods and became a single rib cage. CO2 curves bent downward. The sound of panic changed key. Children cried from relief, and because crying is what you do when something big ends without you understanding how. Valro stood amid the data like a mountain learns to surf. "You made the station a lung," he said to Sam, echo of the dome still in his voice. "The station always was," Sam replied. "We just taught it to breathe on purpose." When the curves flattened into a long, low blue that meant, "We will live," there was no cheer, only a communal sag as bodies remembered they were allowed to be heavy again. Crews ate whatever could be made hot. Someone started music. The grandmother brewed tea from the prophetic kettle and announced, deadpan, that the prophecy for the day was, "Try bolts before glue." Repairs and root cause analysis followed like rain after thunder. Filters hadn't failed alone. Tiny shifts in spin had altered flow patterns until eddies became trapdoors. The fix would be months of careful, maddening work. The chamber had given them the habit to make that work bearable. Listen, move in rhythm, write the story as you go. Valros drafted a new clause for the parchment while grease dried on his scales. Joint stewardship of breath systems, it read in both languages. Shared maintenance, open logs, no secrecy where lungs are involved. Put that on page 1, Sam said. Not buried in middle pages no one reads. Valros nodded, and for a moment he looked nothing like an emperor and exactly like a father. The parchment is ready for signatures, but before ink meets light, the hatchling prince arrives with a question only Sam can answer. The hatchling found him in the quiet that follows a storm. He was taller now by a whisker, scales deepening from tide blue to storm green, eyes alight with the mischief of unspent courage. The toy flyer rode his shoulder, wings tucked, core pulsing the slow contentment of things repaired and kept. "My tutors say you made the station breathe," the youth said without preamble. "They say I must understand why. My father says to ask you." Sam set aside the manifold he was tuning and sat on the floor because conversations with children and sovereigns deserve the same posture. Present, unrushed, lower than your pride. "We taught it to breathe," he corrected. Together. The prince, Elin, he offered shyly, plopped cross-legged, mirroring. Teach me the part that is not in my books, Sam considered. Your books will tell you the math, he said. They won't tell you the metaphor. Machines are bodies pretending to be buildings. Bodies want rhythm. Rhythm wants listening. If you listen long enough, the machine stops being a stranger. Elin frowned in the precise way children do when they are working very hard. My tutors say listening is passive. Then your tutors have never kept an engine alive at 3 a.m. Thanks for traveling with us among the stars. If this chapter stirred something in you, stay close. What comes next might change everything you think you know about kindness, power, and how broken things find their way back. See you in the next breath. The scent of scorched insulation laced the narrow service crawl as Sam Weller elbowed deeper into Harmony's refuge, a trading station that floated like a lantern in cold space. His knees rasped along latticework grating while a hail of orange sparks stitched across overhead pipes. Another day, another meltdown, literally, thanks to a group of well-meaning Zapiri merchants who'd optimized a voltage coupler for their own equipment. Their fix had vaporized 3 fuses and plunged half the lower wards into twilight. Sam didn't complain. Fixing things wasn't a job to him. It was a moral reflex. He braced a portable lamp, cracked a heat-sealed panel, and leaned into a cracked relay tree. Harmony's refuge thrummed around him, vendors haggling in braided languages, cargo sleds whining, the low ribcage deep throb of life support, a mechanical prayer that never stopped. Sam had lived on stations like this for years. He never collected titles, just scars, calluses, and reputation. Useful, dependable, unremarkable. He closed the last jumper, listening for the sweet, even hum that meant you did it when something fragile rippled through the noise. A whimper, soft, animal, close. He paused, toolkit in one hand, lamp in the other, and followed the sound deeper into the maintenance throat of the station until a cul-de-sac of stacked crates took shape in the lamplight. Wedged in the shadow, trembling, was a hatchling, a dragon no bigger than a house cat, scales flickering from moon silver to shallow sea blue. Tears beaded its snout. In its claws, a shattered toy flyer, all delicate wings and crystalline seams, split along the spine. Sam had heard plenty about the Drukhari Dominion, all empire and thunder, ruled by ancient sovereigns in crowns of flame. But this was not a legend. This was a child, alone, grieving, clutching a broken miracle. He set the lamp low and knelt at a respectful distance. The hatchling didn't flee. It extended the wreck as if asking a priest for a blessing. The fragments were strange. Living metal veined with soft light, a song crystal core pulsing like a heartbeat in sleep. Sam understood almost none of the materials, but the architecture still spoke his language. Power in, path through, intention out. Machines were puzzles with feelings. You listened and they told you where they hurt. He laid the pieces on clean cloth, rolled his shoulders, and reopened his kit. The child edged closer until Sam could see its pupils brighten with each careful motion. The toy had been more than decorative. Those filigreed patterns weren't just flourish. They were functional circuits that wove art through math. Beautiful things often work better, he'd noticed, because beauty forces precision. He began with the shell, warming and reseating the parted seams, the living alloy answered by flowing like memory back into place. Wings next. He replaced sheared microconnectors with hair-thin salvaged wire, accepting the inelegance in exchange for fidelity. Hardest was the core, the song crystal linked to a mesh of microcircuits whose timing was peculiar. The pulses felt random until Sam stopped measuring and started listening. After 3 minutes of stillness, he heard the cadence emerge, a long pattern, repeating like a distant tide that only pretended to be chaos. He built tiny capacitive bridges from spare stock, letting the toy sip and release energy in step with the crystal's own rhythm. The hatchling made curious chirps, sometimes pointing with a precise little claw as if to say, there, that bit matters. It reminded Sam of farm work on New Dak, where he'd learned that tractors and air pumps confess their troubles if you let the noise sink into your bones. Hours thinned. Station lights dimmed to imitate night. Sam toggled the core and for a beat nothing moved. Then gentle sequence lights tracked the hull. The wings unfurled. The engines sighed. The little flyer rose on a cushion of sound so soft that the dust barely stirred. The hatchling squealed, a musical thrill, and clapped. The toy answered with a celebratory loop and landed in the child's arms. Good as new, Sam murmured, cleaning tools, though he knew it was better than new. His improvised bridges translated signals with less waste than the original traces. The timing fix gave the little flyer a grace that felt inevitable. The hatchling chirped a melody that needed no dictionary. Sam gave a careful pat between thin horns and started back toward the relay stack he was meant to fix. He didn't see the figure at the far mouth of the corridor, a massive shadow with old, ember-bright eyes, watching with the patience of deep time. The ancient gaze in the dark belongs to someone whose curiosity can bend empires, and Sam's kindness has just been noticed. By morning's bell, Harmony's refuge wore its habitual bustle, but wordless questions trailed Sam like contrails. Who had left a dragon child alone in service passages? Where had the toy come from? Why had it felt in his hands like a living instrument that wanted to sing? He filed the questions where he kept all the impossible ones. A shelf labeled, "Fix first. Understand later." 3 decks up, a courier with green lacquered horns and merchant's braids found him at a food kiosk. "You're Weller, the mechanic?" Their tone made it a statement. "I've a cargo hauler on the outer ring. Stasis controls failing. Delicate freight. If it decays, I'm ruined." They slid a cred chip across the counter with practiced desperation. The amount wasn't obscene, but it was respectful. Sam studied the courier's hands. Steady, clean, too symmetrical. Not a liar exactly, just rehearsed. "Lead on," he said. Lives weren't at stake, he was told. But people sometimes called money freight when the freight had a pulse. The hauler looked ordinary on approach. Scuffed plating. Registry half-flaked. But its stasis bay gleamed with technology no independent trader could reasonably afford. Crystal arrays glowed like a choir, flush with frost at the edges. Diagnostics howled, cascading faults jitter in the quantum resonance chamber, entropy biting into expensive lattice-grown lumens. Estimated repair, 3 days minimum. Sam believed the numbers about as much as he believed in tidy coincidences. He moved like always. Hands quiet, senses open. Mapping power flows with a pocket tracer, then with touch, as if reading Braille straight off the machine's skin. The courier, now introduced as Kellen, lingered nearby, the anxious performance relaxing into genuine fascination. Hidden in bulkheads, unseen recorders watched. Sam felt the attention but treated it like space weather. Present, irrelevant. The chamber at the bay's heart had been nudged into discord by someone who knew exactly which lattice screws to mistune. Conventional procedure required a calibration rig the size of a small room and a technician with 10 years of Guild Blue. Sam had neither. He had a pair of calloused thumbs, a fluorometer that read more poetry than data from alien crystals, and a knack for hearing when a machine was whispering the right key. He bled the chamber down to silence and listened. The hum was wrong in 3 spots, a chord with sour thirds. He loosened micro-gimbals, nudged phase-lock rings by degrees so small they felt like superstition, then paused until the harmony returned. Not perfect, but promising. Instruments are useful, he'd tell apprentices he did not have, but patience is the only tool that works on everything. He rerouted load to secondary conduits and lashed in. Translation tape, a hideously expensive roll he always saved for when physics refused to agree with friendship. The tape bridged alien and human tolerances, letting energy travel like language across borders. 15 minutes later, the arrays stabilized. 30 after that, the field was not merely stable. It was cleaner than spec. A bell's note floated in vacuum. Kellen's mask of performance slipped completely into relief. "You did in an hour what the manual says can't be done in less than a week." Sam shrugged. Manuals protect people from pretending. Sometimes pretending is how you find the real path. He showed Kellen the maintenance routine, not full doctrine, just the kind of practical advice that keeps something beautiful alive with minimal fuss. Then he wiped the prints off his tools, pocketed the cred chip, and walked out into corridor light, already thinking about breakfast he'd abandoned. Behind him, silent relays noted an outcome that would travel faster than any courier. The human passed the impossible test and improved the system he was supposed to merely save. On a deck far removed from commerce and clamor, a presence older than the station's steel reviewed the footage. The Drakari Emperor, whose titles could line the hull of a battleship, watched the human's hands, pausing not on the tools but on the moments of stillness, the minutes where nothing happened except listening. In the drift between adjustments, The Emperor recognized something his brightest academies struggled to teach: reverence. Sam returned to his closet-sized workshop to tune a plasma conduit that liked to drift whenever the station's spin regulators hiccuped. He rarely locked the door. Today a visitor let the HFY aside and entered like a question dressed in velvet. A hood masked most of their features, but the reveal around wrist and throat told truth. Drakari scales, lacquered by birthright. The voice that followed was educated into precision. You are Sam Weller. I require work that others say cannot be done. Time is thin. Sam set the conduit down. What's the patient? A family vessel. A stasis pod has failed. The person inside cannot survive long if it does not sing true again. Sam said gently, listening is work. It is an act. It changes the thing listened to and you. They toured the chamber. Island asked questions in loops rather than lines, returning to an idea after 3 others had wandered past, plucking new angles from old hooks. Sam showed him the field resonator repaired by rehearsal, the bellow struts that turned a dome into a lung, the kettle that prophesied bolts. He confessed that sometimes his fixes were wrong first, then right, then wrong again before they settled. Island glowed at the idea that error could be honorable. They ended at the toy flyer. Sam asked permission with a glance. The prince nodded. Sam opened the core and showed the bridges he had built, imperfect solder now polished by time into something approaching intent. I did not know your material, he said, so I made it speak my tongue while trying to learn a little of yours. Elin touched the bridge with one talon. I thought fixing meant returning something to exactly what it was, he said softly. It can, Sam answered. But sometimes repair is an introduction. The object becomes itself plus the story of what it survived. The prince stood very straight, suddenly imperial. Will you stand with us when the parchment is signed? He asked. Not as a mechanic. As a witness, I'm not a politician, Sam said. Good, Island replied. We have too many. Sam laughed until the toy flyer hummed in sympathy. I'll stand, he said. They walked back through a station that smelled like metal cooling after miracle. In the viewport, the planet below turned patient and blue. Elin pressed his forehead briefly to the glass in a gesture that needed no translation. I used to think power meant telling things how to be, he said. Now I think it means asking them how they are. Keep that, Sam said. It'll make you enemies with tidy shoes and friends with dirty hands. A courier found them with formality rattling in their throat. The signing is set for second bell in Dock Hall. Their eyes flicked to Sam with a respect that still felt like a borrowed jacket. They want you near the front. Front makes me itchy, Sam said. But okay. As they parted, Elin hesitated. If I break it again, he asked, lifting the flyer, will you fix it? No, Sam said, and the boy's face fell just long enough for the lesson to land. We'll fix it together. Dock Hall fills with witnesses and words. Then a last-minute revelation threatens to undo everything unless Sam can rewrite a clause in real time. Dock Hall had been many things. Dance floor, triage ward, courtroom, warehouse for festivals that needed more ceiling than God. Today it was a cathedral built of scaffolds and vows. Banners hung in bilingual pairs. Screens carried the parchment in living script. Humans wore their best jackets, which is to say clean ones. Drakari polished their scales until the lights had something to do. Sam stood where Elin had asked, near enough to watch the small muscles in Valros's jaw when he read. Threenox hovered like a storm held back by good manners. Kellen flanked the chamber's delegation with the casual aggression of someone who enjoys defending fragile things. The opening speeches were brief by necessity and miracle. Then as signatures began to weave, a Drakari minister cleared her throat with the exquisite timing of someone who has practiced ruining afternoons. One amendment, she said smoothly, projecting a clause in cool white. State secrecy in matters of sovereign security, a paragraph that looked harmless as a folded knife. In summary, the Dominion could classify any joint work retroactively if conditions warranted. Humans had a mirror clause, softer but real. The room tilted. Sam felt it in his bones the way he felt pumps starving. Secrecy, retroactive or otherwise, is how breath systems die quietly. Valros's face did not move, which meant he was furious. Ministers argued in measured voices that nevertheless dripped fear. There are true threats, one said. We must be allowed to put a lid on fire. A human admiral nodded along. We have enemies. They will learn from our openness faster than we learn from their teeth. Sam did not raise his hand. He walked to the nearest screen and asked the parchment to open a space. It did. He wrote a sentence that was not elegant and was therefore perfect. No secrecy where lungs are involved. He underlined it. Expand lungs, someone hissed. He did. Life support, medical systems, infrastructure that, if tampered with, writes the history of the day and names of the dead. He waited. The room argued. He listened for rhythm under rhetoric and heard it, fear layered over pride. He added a second clause. Where secrecy is invoked elsewhere, logs of reason and duration must be kept, to be opened automatically when danger passes, time locked by joint key. A minister barked about naivety. Threenox, of all people, said, We have seen the cost of quiet. Kellen spoke in the register of shop floors. If you hide bolts, beams fall. People stop trusting the ceiling. Elin lifted his chin and asked the room, Do you want me to rule a kingdom of people who hold their breath because they don't know if the air is for sharing? Valros' silence broke like ice. Adopt the clauses, he said, each word a gavel. The human admiral hesitated exactly as long as it takes a kettle to choose to whistle. Adopted, she said. The ministers wrote their reluctance into the margins as footnotes disguised as grace. With that, the parchment breathed. Signatures flowed. Light folded into light, and the hall exhaled a sound that was not cheer and not prayer, but a cousin of both. After, in the corridor where triumph cools into tomorrow, Threenox stopped Sam with a hand like an old tool polished by use. I dislike you less, he said, which was both joke and benediction. You make engineers dangerous to the right things. Kellen looped an arm through Sam's. We'll need supply chains, training cohorts, translators, 1,000 small sane choices. You in? I was in the moment a child asked me to fix a toy, Sam said. Valros joined them, looking thinner, which meant lighter. You have taught me 3 forms of power, he said. Attention, patience, sunlight. Keep them, Sam replied. Teach them forward. They stepped into Harmony's refuge together. The station still creaked when it breathed. It always would. That was all right. Living things make noise. Sam carried his tools because there would always be ovens and pumps and instruments that forgot their songs. The chamber opened its doors for the first day after the first day. People brought problems. They left with stories. That night, the toy flyer did a slow circle of Sam's shop and landed beside a handwritten sign that read, in 2 languages, Listen first in sleep. The station hummed like a loved thing repaired and kept. In the distance, a signal arrives from the dark, an old human beacon speaking in a rhythm no one recognizes yet. But Sam smiles. Rhythm, after all, is where listening begins.